let me introduce, I want to thank Aarti for joining us. This is, it's a real thrill. We got to know each other for the first time in a visit to San Francisco in the fall, and met up again when she was on campus for a Case Western Reserve University board meeting. And we were talking about opportunities to get in front of students, and thrilled that you're able to do this. So I'm going to turn it over to Adrian, who's one of our great undergrad students, who's a Weatherhead major, who's going to sort of run the show, and I will mute myself and turn it over to Adrian.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. My name is Adrian Hatton. I'm a senior marketing and organizational leadership concentration on the management track. I'm also a 2020 Venture for America Fellow, which means that I'll be spending the next 2 years working for a startup in one of 14 American cities. Don't know where yet, but I'm really excited to dive in. I'm super excited today because I think that impact investing is a hugely important topic that we haven't all gotten to experience in our curriculum at Case. So I'm really excited to have Aarti with us today to discuss that. And as usual, go ahead and if you have questions, put them in the chat along with an introduction and even a link to your LinkedIn profile so we can get connected here today. And throughout the talk, Aarti's going to present some slides at the beginning, and then I'll be kind of combining our questions together and feeding those forwards on the second half of the session. So thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to learn from Aarti today.
Hi. So Adrian, do you want me to just introduce myself?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, so I'm Aarti Chandha, and several of you on the call know me. I cannot tell you how excited I am to, have met Michael and also get acquainted with the Veale Institute of Entrepreneurship. This is something that's excessively close to my heart, and I did not start out as an entrepreneur. I came to the US as an international student and studied computer science. I was a graduate student at Case Western Reserve, studied computer science, and then went on to I started my career for an boutique Oracle consulting firm in Cleveland, and then moved to the Bay Area in '91, and have been in the Bay Area since and just love it. So I worked for various tech companies through my career, and a few years ago when ed tech was becoming super, super popular, my son was very young. I have two kids and a dog and a husband who I met at Case Western Reserve. But my kids, my youngest one is a dog who's 4 years old. And then I have a 12-year-old daughter who is on spring break, supposedly this week, at home. We've been home since March 1st. So, and then I have a son who's also studying computer science and is a sophomore at WashU, who's also at home right now. So that said, I came here to the Bay Area and have worked in different high-tech companies, both hardware and software. But a few years ago, when my kids were much, much younger and ed tech was taking off, I decided to move and careers and try and become an entrepreneur in the ed tech field, and was trying to build something like Yelp, but really to be able to pick the best after school and online classes for my kids. And I put in our own money and built it, and people loved it. But then I realized being an entrepreneur is an extremely difficult thing, and was finding it quite hard to balance work and other things. So I actually worked with another entrepreneur, and the two of us did this together, and then actually merged it into another company. And at that point, I just found that working, consulting, and mentoring entrepreneurs was a better career for me, and I enjoyed it very much. In that process, I somehow met social entrepreneurs and got even more excited seeing social entrepreneurs, because it was not just about making money, but it was making money and also doing it for a good cause. So that's when I started my career working with social entrepreneurs. Somehow in there, I got introduced to MIT's D-Lab Accelerator program, and mentored several of the students in the MIT D-Lab program, and then just being as close as I am geographically to Stanford, I got introduced to the Social Innovation Center in the Graduate Business School at Stanford, and have been mentoring there a bit, and then also got introduced to Santa Clara University's Miller Center. And there, it's not students, it's actually entrepreneurs from all over the world. Many of, their various age groups, various stages of their lives. It's a long mentoring session. You mentor them for several months, and then they graduate from that. But all of those already have businesses running. So that's been my mentoring and social entrepreneurship gig lately. But what I found was, fortunately, I got reacquainted with Case Western Reserve a few years ago. It was Daniel and Anne, who are also on the call, and Barbara, who came and found us. And I cannot tell you how excited I am to have been reacquainted. And the students I've met at Case Western Reserve are just amazing. After having worked with students from other universities, I am proud to be a Case alum, and I'm also proud to be on the board of trustees at Case Western Reserve. So thank you all for everything that you're doing. So that's enough of that for my background. I think you guys know who I am and how I got into this career. So maybe let's get started. So just also, my husband is an investor, but he invests on the other side of it. He's a venture capitalist, so he invests for making money. I invest for both impact and making money. So we work with very different companies. Can we get the first slide on, please? Okay, so my advice to invest is investing in tennis balls. No, but they do have a very high rate of return. But that's basically, a lot of investors will invest just for the high rate of return, not me. So next slide. This is for those of you who are not super familiar with social entrepreneurship. I like the slide, and some of you may have seen this, but one end of it is just pure philanthropy. So when you give a hungry family a fish, it's a charitable cause. You're giving them a fish, they eat the fish, and they're back again asking for the next fish. From there, you move to sustainability, where if you teach a family to fish, they can catch their own fish, so you've done some good. But if you go to the next level, where you actually set up a co-op and get various people to fish, get them to start an exporting fish business, have them sell to communities, fish to communities that do not fish, you now have made them fully sustainable. And that's where social impact comes in and social change. So those would be social entrepreneurs at, on the right side of it. So that's what we're trying to achieve in impact investing, is not just write a check and help somebody out, but actually change how they do things and make them fully sustainable and profitable. Okay, next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with impact investing, this is actually a really good slide to look at. If you look at the right side, you have traditional philanthropy, where people are writing a check, to the Red Cross or to a food bank or whatever it is. It's pure philanthropy. You write a check, you do good, you feel good, and you're done. The next level up is venture philanthropy, and I work very closely. I'm on the board of directors and work very closely, lead impact investing at Silicon Valley Social Venture Fund. And there we do both impact investing, and the philanthropy we do is venture philanthropy, which means that we do philanthropy just like a venture capitalist would invest in a company. We go with early stage companies, they're innovative, The only difference is we do complete due diligence. We have a rubric we follow. We look at all of their financials. We work on their business plan. We do all of that. The only difference is that the return in this case is impact, purely impact, and not a financial impact. Even if it is a revenue generating nonprofit, it's still a nonprofit, but we treat philanthropy with a venture lens. So that's basically venture philanthropy. Then if you look at the left-hand side, you have traditional investing where when you invest, all you care about is how much do I make, what's my rate of return, how much am I going to make on this investment? So that's your left-hand side where it's traditional investing. Many of you have probably heard of ESG and ESG risk management. So all that ESG really stands for is environmental, sustainability, and governance. So you're following those three things. SRI is socially responsible investing. So in this kind of investing, what you're doing is you are doing a negative screen and you are not investing in companies that may be negatively impacting either the environment, sustainability, or where you feel you're not socially responsible. So you may not invest in a company, for example, that is promoting tobacco, or you may not invest in a company that's promoting pornography or those kinds of things. So you're screening out bad companies. That does not mean that you are necessarily investing in companies that have a positive impact. It's just you're doing the screen. The next level up, in the middle falls impact investing, and that could go either way. So you could have impact, it's always impact first, but you could have impact first with a very high market rate return. A good example of that, a recent one, is Beyond Meat, where it was a highly positive impact and a very high rate of return. We've had many others like that. Honest Tea was another one that got bought by by Coca-Cola. So Honest Tea was a good one. Method, Ben & Jerry's, all those fall into the impact investing space but have had high market rate returns. And then you have other companies that do a lot of do good, but may not have had the highest rate of return. Examples would be Delight, which was started by a student at Stanford, where they make solar lights that are very, very heavily used in underserved countries. You may have also heard about, I forget the name of the company, but it's basically a blanket to swaddle premature babies that just keeps their temperature warm and keeps them alive. Now, those are all very high impact companies, but the market rate has not, it's been below market rate of return, but there's still been a rate of return. So you are looking at making money in both of those instances, but it just depends on you as an impact investor, whether you're looking for impact first and a high rate of market return or not that higher rate of market return. And Omidyar does this very well. They invest in all kinds of things, and they actually look at companies with a different lens depending on what they're expecting as a rate of return there. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so what kind of impact may a company have? And here we talk about, the reason I like this is because you can think about it as impact classes, just like you think about asset classes, etc. So it may be a place that you're investing in if it's a certain geography, or it may be some kind of people that you're investing in. Town Kitchen is a company that I am actually quite familiar with, and they have hired kids out of foster homes and train them to do catering and get into more of the food business. So it's very people oriented. And then you have others that are process oriented, where you've changed how people do agriculture or, fair trade, etc. So it's that. And then you have food related, a product. It could be a clean plastic. It could be a certain kind of battery that's, or it could be a solar product. In this instance, they've shown Revolution Foods, which were healthy foods that are provided to schools, these are school lunches. And then you could be shifting a complete paradigm of how enterprises work with each other, create sustainable ways of doing business, etc. So it could be any of these different classes. So the way you think about impact and how a company may have impact is very different based on what you're thinking of doing. Okay, let's go to the next one. And I think that's just questions, right? No. Oh, I don't know how many of you are familiar or not familiar with the sustainable goals. So these are the UN sustainable goals. And typically, when you invest in an impact company, you look to see which of these goals may be satisfied. More often than not, multiple goals are satisfied at any given time. So oftentimes poverty and education will come together, or sustainability and poverty go together. There's many of these that go together. Gender equality is a good one that oftentimes will fit in uplifting communities in Africa where you're teaching women entrepreneurship. So you're doing multiple things at once. You're hitting geography, you're hitting poverty, you're hitting gender equality, etc. So these are the sustainable goals that most impact investors look for when they make impact investments, because you are an impact entrepreneur is required to provide an impact report on an annual basis. So it's important that their metrics fit into one of these goals. Okay. Next. So this is the balance I was talking about that is kind of always difficult for any of us, where impact investing is really a positive impact plus financial return, and it is very, very difficult to balance these two. People get highly emotional about impact investing because if someone is hugely into climate change, then that impact becomes more important than the return that they get. On the other hand, if somebody is an animal activist, plant-based foods might be super important, or the way animals are treated in pastures, etc., becomes very important, or the way dairy farms are run become. So it just really depends on what you, as a human being, want, the impact you want to bring about. And that's why impact investing is so much more difficult than traditional investing, where you're looking for a high rate of return and that's what you're looking for. Whereas with impact investing, there's a lot of emotion that comes in, because what one perceives as impact is different than what somebody else perceives as impact. So this balance becomes super, super difficult. Next slide, please. That's it. Okay, I've done a lot of talking. I'm going to shut up and let's start a discussion or some questions.
Great. So a ton of questions have rolled in so far. And kind of going off of what you were just talking about with these different impact classes and factors like the SDGs, do you find that there are any specific factors that you look at in your investments or trend towards? And of any of the SDGs, are there any that tend to have higher returns in your experience?
Yeah. So let me. So personally, my personal investments are, in most cases, technology for good, and that's because it's an area that I understand well, and it's also an area that typically gives a higher rate of return. You don't have to deal with supply chain. You don't have to deal with product manufacturing, etc. So examples of that would be, I recently invested in a company called Haven Connect, and what they do is they have for those of you who may be familiar with affordable housing, it is extremely difficult for people to get into an affordable housing place because the process is excessively cumbersome, and yet there are buildings that fall in the affordable housing space and have vacancies. And that's not right. That problem needs to be solved. We found that a lot of people who fall into this category that need affordable housing are oftentimes professionals who, for whatever the reason, have not been able to get the resources that they should have been able to get. And no one's really catering to that sector of people. So with Haven Connect, what they did was, so she met several SDGs. So it's a woman-run company. They're working with various communities in the United States. So it's not geography specific in that it's not just dealing with one community in a certain state. It is geography specific in that it's US based, so it's not global. But what they did is they completely cleaned up the process and have automated how somebody sends in an application. They can do it from an app on their phones. Most homeless people lately do have phones. Google gives phones to homeless people in the Bay Area if they don't have a phone. So she started out in New York, and then I think it was New York, Chicago, Silicon Valley, and she moved out of here because it's extremely expensive to live in the Silicon Valley, and is now based out of Texas. But just cleaning up the process and getting a database of this section of people that can now be provided with other resources has been hitting multiple SDGs, pulling them out of poverty, giving them housing. In many situations, it also meant educating the younger kids, because they were now in a home, so they could go to the same school district as opposed to being thrown from place to place. Giving them financial security. So it met many of these. So that's one of the examples that I can give. But that's just, again, a personal thing. I'm not a chemist, so I don't fully understand that area. So Bill Gates has invested a lot of money in cleaning dirty water and cleaning poop. Basically taking the sewage and making it into clean water and distributing that as clean water. That's something I don't understand. I have been presented with those, but anyways, yeah.
I think also a lot of people have wondered, since it's not something that is necessarily taught a ton in our courses, and we haven't had a ton of exposure, but outside of, business schools currently, how do you feel that the awareness for impact investing is growing or not growing? And if that has or if the current virus has any impact on what that might look like in our future?
Sorry, so what the current virus is, the impact that it's had on impact investing, is that the question?
Yeah, and also the awareness of impact investing.
So, outside of business school, so it just depends on whether you're in an entrepreneurial kind of setup or not. If you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you don't need to be in business school to know about impact investing. And again, I'm speaking specifically to the Bay Area. We have just a ton of impact investors who are, social entrepreneurs who are approaching impact investors, mainly because they're entrepreneurs at heart, but they're entrepreneurs with a really good heart. So they want to build something sustainable, and they also want to make money. And I think rightfully so, there is no harm in making money. But one of the interesting ones that I was a judge at a Seed conference in San Francisco, and this was an interesting one that she was actually a finalist, and we didn't know whether we wanted to invest in this or not invest in this, but ended up not. So here we are sitting as judges, and she gives each one of us a shot of vodka. Okay. So we're like, what does vodka have to do with us being on the panel? So we drank her vodka. It was good. We had the shot, and then she explained to us what she was doing. So she was working with farmers who raise cattle, and she was working with farmers who make cheese, and a lot of the byproducts of whey is just thrown away. And she didn't want that to happen. So she actually took the byproducts of whey and converted it into a vodka. So there was an impact. She was helping people, but we could not support that because it was alcohol. So that didn't fall into the lens of, and she was not from any business school or any of those. She purely had grown up and worked on a farm and just felt like we keep pouring this out. So my suggestion to her was make protein-based vodka. Maybe you'll do better than just vodka. But anyway, so that's an extreme example. But there's a lot of people in different areas, women who are trying to make better clothing, trying to use organic type of things, or working with indigenous people in different countries. There's people who have worked on coffee farms who are bringing coffee from different co-ops all over the world and trying to sell that in the US, helping many, many different people all over the world. So I don't think you need to be in business school to know that. How has this virus, so interestingly enough, I had mentored a company that's in the telehealth space, and their apps, they did a triage service, and their apps helped people in very remote locations in many parts of Asia. So they were in Bangladesh, Vietnam, parts of India, very, very remote places that had no medical treatment at all. So they would train social workers and send social workers out with this fully built triage service that they had on there. And it had to be on cell phones because they had cellular service, but you really couldn't charge laptops and stuff like that in many of these places. And that company is actually doing well right now with this whole virus situation, because more and more people are subscribing to them. Most of our social entrepreneurs are facing an extremely difficult time right now because of funding issues. Many of their businesses are face-to-face businesses, or they have a supply chain, those kinds of things. So they are, I was on a call just before this call, and about how we are trying to help people to pivot their business. So there's the STEM-based company that I worked with, and it's an after-school program, STEM-based for underserved students. And since their labs, they had to pivot where they're now sending their actual lab kits are being mailed to these kids at home so they can actually continue to work. But it's now in a different mode. It's not, they can't handhold them and do it. So companies are trying to pivot as much as they can, but it is difficult to pivot certain businesses. So it's had a huge negative impact, mainly because of financing.
Right. And you and I, the other day, we talked a little bit about Line Loop, and which is the case that the students in this class reviewed recently. And we talked about how their business is also changing because of the concerns of contamination with these reusable shipping containers. So I was curious if you could give a little bit of background to Line Loop for the people here that didn't read the case, sure. And also how due diligence can be done with companies like that are suffering from the virus.
Yeah. So Line Loop is a company it's just quite an outstanding company. It's run, So I do not invest in women-only companies. I invest in any social entrepreneur who is a good social entrepreneur, period. This Lime Loop happens to be a woman-run company where it's run by 2 women, and one is a woman of color and one is not. This is not their first company. They've worked together previously. So the way that they started out was they were in China, and they were upcycling billboards from China and upcycling the material of billboards that were removed, because, as you know, a billboard sustains any kind of climate. So they were upcycling the billboard materials and making these reusable shippers, which were largely used in the retail world. And they also won a fellowship at Levi's. So they were upcycling materials from Levi's to line these shippers. And it's very, very simple and easy to use. Here's a shipper. I have one of their little shippers, and I don't know if you can see it or not. But so these shippers, you can just send them back in the mail. Now, what's nice about them is they can be reused 200 times. Every time you get a cardboard box, even though it's recyclable, I don't know how many of you know this, but recycling anything is not simple. So when paper or cardboard gets recycled, just a lot of water gets used in the process, and a lot of energy gets used in the process to recycle cardboard. We think we're doing good by recycling, but we're using just way too much water and way too much energy in the whole recycling process. So it's better to use a reusable if you can. Just like Adrian and I are using reusable bottles right now instead of glass bottles. I noticed both of us seem to have blue bottles somehow when drinking. So anyways, so these are reusable shippers, and they've done just an outstanding job with saving the number of trees that they've saved per container. I don't have the exact numbers, but I had given it in your reading, but they're just tons of trees are being saved. A ton of, actually, I may have the exact numbers, and I think I should give you the exact numbers if I have them here. Let me see. So their whole thing is sustainability, saving trees, saving water, and saving shipping. So that was their whole goal, was just saving these things and the whole sustainability aspect. The cost is very cheap. It's a great business because it's subscription-based. Companies pay $2 a month per shipper, which is cheaper than them trying to use cardboard for shipping. So that was another plus that they had. They were upcycling instead of recycling materials. The minute we started, another thing is all of our recyclables and a lot of our garbage was being shipped to China. That has stopped. That stopped a while back. So even if it's recyclables, our landfills are getting filled with them because we are not sending them anywhere. So the less you recycle and the more you can upcycle, the better it is from a sustainability and environment standpoint. So they had all these pluses going for them. They also had some pretty amazing investors that had committed to them. Citibank had also committed to them. Citibank just started a new fund, $150 million impact fund, and they had committed as well. Unfortunately, because Corona kicked in before their close, they have now put that on hold. So this is a company that has suffered tremendously because of the virus, and because their funding was coming from New York, they suffered even more. So their cash flow is okay. They can keep going for a few more months, but if money does not come in, this is a good company that will have to shut down, not for any fault of theirs, but for the current circumstances. Now, will people be concerned about reusable shippers given what happens with hygiene, etc. So that's another factor that they have to think about, and they have been cleaning even more than before. On the insides, on the outsides, it's the same thing, whether you have paper or a reusable shipper, because the outside is going to be exposed as it ships. And they are pivoting their business now to working more with shipping healthcare products, because that's what's being shipped far more than clothing, which they were primarily used for. So that's been their huge negative impact as far as the virus goes.
And then Reed asked, have you ever made a poor investment choice? And were there any red flags that made you realize this? And kind of what are your takeaways from those more negative experiences in investing?
So, I made a poor investment choice in what I thought was not a poor investment choice, but it turned out to be a poor investment choice. So some of you may be familiar with these, you don't have to be a programmer, you don't have to have a computer science degree. You can do one of these quick courses, a 10-week crash course where you learn how to program and you can go program. Okay, so there was an entrepreneur who had done this super successfully, run these boot camps in a for-profit manner for students who could afford to pay and go do these boot camps and then get them hired at many of the well-known high-tech companies here. So he ran this successfully, very successfully, made a ton of money, sold his boot camp to some private, one of these smaller private universities, the Phoenix types that have classes. I don't know exactly, I don't remember who he sold it to, but now he got a good heart after he did this and decided that let me do this for a different class of people. So he came up with this theory of let's do boot camps for people over the age of 21 who cannot afford to learn programming, but if they want to, they can, because they have the aptitude to. So he gave them a test and said, if you qualify, you can come join my boot camp. You pay me nothing. I give you a stipend of $2,000 a month while you're doing this, or $1,000 a month or whatever. So they didn't have to do another job. And many of them were Uber drivers or garbage collectors, all kinds of people who had the aptitude but didn't have the finances, joined his boot camp. And the way that they were going to pay him back was when they get a job, 20% of their salary, assuming that they made over 70K, 20% of their salary was going to go back to him. And that's how they would pay back over a period of time. And if you looked at his statistics, he would have been, the way he presented to us was he would have been cash flow positive within 3 years of his business. And this was a highly profitable business. And he had proven previously that this was a highly profitable business. However, it did not work that way. He had a lot of people sign up, but his giving out stipends was not the best thing he did. People dropped out. They took their stipends, they dropped out. There was no way to get the money back. There was no way to track people properly once they got a job, especially if they moved out of the area and did not connect back. It just became a nightmare of a process, and he had to shut down. So any investment we made in that was gone. So yeah, that was a bad investment with something that we thought would be a good investment.
So how do you, so what are red flags that you look for generally? And in with that, Marissa wondered, what startup companies can do when looking for funding that can kind of make sure that they're in a good place?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things we look at. So first is the team. That I think that is extremely important. The most important thing is how good is the team? How good is their idea? What is their business model? Is this a sustainable business model? Because a lot of times social entrepreneurs will come to you and they forget that even if they are profitable year to year, that does not mean they can return your investment. So my recommendation to people who come in and say, I'm doing, whatever it is that their idea may be, if they cannot make a return, they're just making, even if they're making $1 million profit a year, it is a lifestyle business. You can run a lifestyle business forever with a services business, a consulting type business. I've had people come in and say, oh, we're running a consulting type business and we are hiring, we are hiring the underserved or something like that, and they think it's too good. It's not a business that's going to return to an investor, because how do you exit? So one of the things that I look for is, what's your exit strategy? Who is going to acquire you, if at all? Or in most cases, they cannot IPO. Beyond Meats was one of those that IPO'd, but in most cases, it would be an acquisition after a certain point. So when is that going to happen? Will they ever reach that stage? And if that's not going to happen, then it shouldn't be an equity investment. It should be a loan that's given to someone with a certain rate of return, and that's then going to be below market, obviously. So there's, business model is a big thing that we look at. The financial, do the entrepreneurs understand finance? Because if they don't know how to do a proper financial model, they probably will not be able to run this business well. Are they able to hire and attract the right kinds of people? Are they really having an impact? Is something changing or not? The competition, the next company that comes to me again with another math app or any ed tech app, I just say no to them. It's a very saturated area, right? So definitely look at the whole competitive lens. Why are you differentiating yourself? How do you stand out? I do look for patents. I do look for, because anything you or I do, somebody else can do it better and quicker. So what is it that's differentiating you from somebody else? And how can you, sustain and stay? So those are definitely things that I look for. Well, your supply chain, if you're manufacturing something, think about the supply chain. If that breaks on you, you're done. So how strong is your supply chain? Who are your partners? If you're having a positive social impact, but you're partnering with people who are not, what does that mean? And then, are you going to pivot for money? So a classic example of a company that pivoted for money is Joule. Joule started out as a classroom project, 2 students at Stanford who were trying to get people to stop smoking with e-cigarettes. But they realized at some point that they could not survive, and they pivoted the business so badly that they got money from tobacco companies. So instead of doing good, it started becoming, let's chase money, who cares about, what happens to people. So that's like one of those bad pivots. So I definitely look for entrepreneurs who want to stay on course no matter what.
And Han asked, as well as a few other people were curious, on your perspective of impact investing 5 to 10 years from now. Do you think that'll become increasingly popular? Will for-profit companies shift their models at all? moving forward?
So impact investing is for profit. It's not nonprofit, right? I think there's going to be some kind of a hybrid, or the term impact investing is going to change a little bit, because when it's impact first, it is difficult to get. This is again my personal opinion. Others may differ, but it's difficult to be purely impact first and get a very high rate of return. So I think what's going to happen is it's going to be impact investing will stay. It's going to be impact, but I think some of it is going to get modified where investors are going to look for a higher rate of return, because at the end of the day, when an investor invests, they want a certain rate of return. Otherwise, if it's partial charitable, it becomes confusing. So, as an example, a company approached me not too long ago, and what they're doing is all of us use cleaning agents at home, and we all go to the store and we buy these huge bottles of Method or Index or Windex or whatever cleaning agent one may buy, and they're all being sold as liquids that are being transported, which is extremely expensive to transport, in plastic bottles, all of which, everything there is environmentally bad. So there was a company that approached us that has their own patented way of making environmentally friendly tablets that can be sent out with a reusable container. Right, so what you do at home is you put the tablet in their reusable container and you add water to it and you spray it, and then it's clean. You don't have to keep going and buying these huge, already pre-made bottles of cleaner. And I thought this was a great idea. Now, how many people are doing this, I don't know. But that's a company, if it's done properly, could actually be highly profitable and make money. Right? What's the impact there? The impact there is environmental. Would it always be an impact first company? Probably not. They might need to pivot depending on who they partner with to sell their product so that they can get it out globally, because they would need to partner with a Procter & Gamble or a Unilever or someone like that, where profitability becomes first, then over and above your sustainability and environment good. But it could be a combination. That could be like an example.
Gotcha. And I think we have time for another question, and it's something that I think a lot of us can benefit from getting your insight on. As we move forward into our careers, us that are still in school here, do you have any advice for people that want to make a social impact and want to do good throughout their careers? And just any advice you might have for people moving forward?
Sure. I think all of us should in our own ways try to have. So any company you join, if you can make a little bit of a change in that company, that would be great. So many large companies are using clean energy now, and purposefully using clean energy. If they're not, they're changing it. Just the garbage collection that happens in each and every building is unreal. I myself, I feel bad every time I use a plastic cup, because I know I'm adding to something that's bad to the environment. So I think for each of us, no matter what we do, if we just keep that lens on of how can we make it better, or can we make this small little change where I'm using a reusable bottle, or I'm, not doing, if I can have, use a solar lamp as opposed to something else, should I do it? Can I do it? Same goes with cars, etc. Should I walk more, or should I drive more, or can I ride my bike more? Those kinds of things, any little change that we can make, I think would be tremendous. If you can, I think looking for a job, one should join a company that has a good value system. I would be careful with where I go, because most of us are looking to do good. And I think many companies are now pivoting to that, and they have the ESG lens, if nothing else. I personally I have found that social entrepreneurs are just amazing people. They're entrepreneurs at the next level. They're entrepreneurs with a good heart. That's how I look at them. And I think it's perfectly fine to make money, and it's perfectly fine to make a lot of money if they can with the business that they have. But to keep that lens on where the do good comes first before the make money at any cost. Make money is good, but make money at any cost, I'm not sure that that's the best thing.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
And now I'll hand it back over to Michael.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. Well, that went fast. What a great hour together. Adrian, thank you so much for your moderating. It's been really fun to watch the students play the role of moderators, almost to the point of, as I think about my teaching style in the future, I was like, I need more student moderators. It makes my job so easy. I can just sort of sit and watch the students ask great questions and direct the conversation. So Adrian, thank you for volunteering to do that. And that was great. I know we have one last poll question. We'll see if this works again. Doug, if you want to put up a question for the participants, that would be great. So how likely are you to purchase products from a company that's clearly involved with social impact versus one that isn't clearly involved as you make those buying decisions? Great. Okay, why don't we end the polling? Great. So we have, maybe with this group, maybe Aarti, after your discussion today, we should have asked people before the discussion and after. So it looks like quite a few folks on this call have an interest. I do want to mention, and I know already you've spent time with my colleague Megan Buchter, who's teaches this class with us and also runs our Fowler Center as an agent for world benefit. So we're doing some nice things at Weatherhead around this topic of social entrepreneurship and companies that are not only sort of selling products, but also making a difference. And actually the students in this class for a final project are looking at social impact entrepreneurs and publishing to the Aim to Flourish platform. So that's exciting. I also want to give a couple of previews of some upcoming events for both students and community members. Tomorrow at noon Eastern time, we'll continue our Beyond Silicon Valley series, and that is focusing on the crisis right now. And tomorrow's topic, actually it's a good follow-up of what you've been talking about today already, is the role of philanthropy. So not necessarily impact investors, but those that are wearing foundations or philanthropic hats about ways that they can help with entrepreneurs in this crisis. So we've got a great panel at noon tomorrow. And then next week, we have some pretty interesting sessions. Again, folks, not just from Northeast Ohio, but from other parts of the country. On Tuesday at 1 o'clock, we'll be joined by Walker Jacobs, who actually went to high school here in the Cleveland area with me and is now the Chief Revenue Officer of Twitch. So my 8th grade son is very excited about that event because he's a Twitch user. He likes to watch people play video games, and it's in addition to playing video games. So I hope you can join us for that, talking about Twitch as part of the Amazon family now. And then we just confirmed next Wednesday a special event at 1 o'clock as part of the series. So Jonas Pate, who has a new show that's dropping on Netflix next Wednesday, we'll be having a conversation about, and the show's called Outer Banks. So actually the day that his show drops, we're going to have a conversation about the changing face of entertainment and entrepreneurship, particularly the presence of Netflix. And he timed his release well. Who knew that when he dropped a show on Netflix that half of the world would be sitting at home. So we'll talk to Jonas about that on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And then Thursday, we'll be back in class with Andy Flom, whose company was acquired by Slack in 2018 and now works there. And for students, we did ask you to join the Slack group as well as posting your assignment into Slack. So as we learn about multiple platforms, including Slack, it's another good way to use it. And then next Friday, we'll have another Beyond Silicon Valley session looking at the role of NGOs. So we're keeping busy, and it's so wonderful to have so many of you from our case community and also from the broader community join these sessions. So with that, Aarti, thank you again for doing this. This was great. It's so awesome to engage with you and have you share your experience. And to the students and community members, hope to see you at one of our upcoming events, and stay safe.
Yeah, no, thanks everyone. And yes, we are writing grants now to some of our impact investees because they cannot raise capital right now. So tomorrow's session should be interesting as well. But right. Thanks everyone. It was lovely seeing all of you on Zoom. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, Aarti. Thanks, everybody.